The word
Yeah.
fuck.
The F word. Don't say that.
Yeah, but as soon as we go live.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, thank you for joining us. We have Tony with us. And Tony, I'm going to let you kind of, just say what's on your mind and what you've been working on out there. And then this is just basically, we just get together and chat about current events, things that are happening and so forth, and show a few things here and there. But, since you're a guest tonight, I'm going to let you go ahead and get us up to date on what you're doing out there.
Yeah. So anyway, I first of all, I stumbled on your channel by stumbling on Mr. Archibald's channel, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And I think it's part of the algorithm or something, because I look at very different things and I get recommended a lot of different smaller channels, and I seem to get better stories and more concise information and quicker. It's like the smaller channels are like the Inquirer sending it up the flagpole. Then when it
Yeah.
starts catching on, then you see Charlie Kirk talking about it or whoever. So basically, the short version of the story is back in 2022. Do you guys know who Anson Williams is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Potsy from
Happy Days. Happy Days.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Hey,
it's a
everybody.
kind of a sordid tale,
Hey,
but I'll
Shannon.
spare you the details. At one time was going out with the mayor of a little tiny town in California, Ojai, California. Most people call it Ojai. And I, without saying anything negative, it just didn't work out. And so I had to part ways. But when I was hanging out with the former mayor, I started hearing conversations directly down into the black hole of the left, and started hearing names and seeing things. Like, what I noticed is when you live in California is that almost everybody thinks you believe what they believe. This town is very left wing, but it's a weird left. I call it, Steven Tyler called it way back in the 90s, right wing liberals, where on the surface they're oh, I'm for the cause and I want to burn a Tesla or whatever, but when you go to their house and you talk to them privately, they're totally different. They're like Reagan Democrats. So I started seeing and observing, but I just kind of put it to the side until 2022, when Anson had announced that he was running, and I was like, I was wondering what his background with being an executive was, or to be a doer, get things done. And wow, I was blown away at his experience. He's directed over 300 TV shows and movies, many we know of, and he also did a lot of other work without really doing it publicly, like for the USO. And his father actually, just about a month or so ago, he had a thing at his house here in town. And I saw this thing on the wall because he did tell me his father was with the crew that stormed the beach of Normandy. And I was walked right over to it, and I saw his little personal notebook of Normandy and all the different towns all the way till he got to Berlin. And there was a photo of him in Berlin. And I guess he ripped off the eagle and the swastika thing from somebody he probably had to kill. So, and through time, he basically told me that he was a Reagan Democrat, and he can't really say much in public, but that people were very extreme. So I filled him in on what I had observed, and I would say that I hope, was the biggest supporter of his. And here comes the election. And you've probably heard this story before. You've heard this one before. There's an election. There's only 3,000 500 people that actually voted within the city limits of town for mayor.
Uh-huh.
And right after the election was over, it was, oh, well, we have to count the ballots. And I was like, okay. So we were, he and I and his wife were all in touch with the county clerk. And it was like, well, we're going to have to update you every Thursday. So he was winning by, I don't know, 100, 150 votes. And then every week he steadily had that many votes. And at the last minute, the last one, they said, well, we think the county's going to be over. Suddenly, the other person that I mentioned earlier won by 42 votes. I was like, huh, that's weird. In California, if it's 1% or less, it triggers an automatic recount. But it was 2 votes over.
Just a fraction.
So there was no recount. So I said, hey, I'll do a recount. And I was stunned at, first of all, I went down there. They didn't know how to handle a recount. They'd never had a recount in Ventura County ever in 100 and something years. So they had to learn real quick. They had to brush up. And then they said, well, you have to do it within 5 days. I said, okay, all right. So Anson and an attorney and I, and even the local newspaper went down there, and then they said, well, it's going to be $28,500. I was like, to count 3,000 ballots? And they said, well, yeah, because we're going to need a lot of bodies. We're going to have to pull people from all over the county. So I was like, okay. So I did it.
3,000 votes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason why they told me was that they have to go through every ballot box, the sealed boxes, and
Yeah. Well,
they have to open
I
every
remember you
box.
telling me. I remember you telling
Yeah.
me about that. And so, but what was the final? What actually happened after that? I mean, I never heard after that. It just did it
Okay,
fall between
I'll
the
get
cracks,
right to
or-
that. I'll speed it up and get right to the point. Okay, so I was in close touch with the guy who was running it. The county clerk wouldn't talk to me. They wouldn't hand over any information that I was entitled to, since I was the requester, and Anson was entitled to. Dodged us, said, "Oh, he's not in." Oh, so anyway, this is where the story kind of got weird, and I discovered some things that I'll tell you about in a minute. The recount was counted. It was counted in 5 days. It was very expensive and weird, but I was there observing, and my son was there observing. Anson was there. We were watching. All of a sudden, the recount was exactly the same. And the attorney did some research. He said never in the history of the United States ever has a recount ever been exactly the same. Never. So I was like, huh, that's weird. And then it got curiouser and curiouser when he actually asked for the voter rolls. They wouldn't give us anything, but all of a sudden they gave him all the voter rolls from every single person who voted in this county and this town. And he came across something very interesting, which is, I don't want to say the name right now, but it's a member of one of the most powerful families in California and the world that is not a United States citizen. In fact, expatriated from the United States. And after that, I was like, well, wait a minute. So they voted, it had the records of all of their votes for years. And when I confronted the election guy, he said, well, maybe you should talk to the district attorney and the attorney general and all those people in the media and something. So I contacted all of them. I got stonewalled. Nobody wanted to do anything. They're like, well, we don't investigate voter fraud at the voter fraud section of the district attorney's office, etc. So anyway, I dug a little deeper with the attorney's help. And not only was the person actually isn't a resident of California, not a citizen of California, not a citizen of the United States. They actually literally, I guess you could say, domicile in another state, and they're a citizen of another country. So I'm like, I thought that was like maybe illegal. But what made it worse, and this is where George Soros etc., the type, they do their stuff through subterfuge and back channels, so they never have to face criminal charges. So anyway, I started looking, and on the public record, brazenly placed there with a lot of mostly left-wing organizations, they post exactly how much people donate to candidates. And that right there is extremely illegal, to be donating to candidates. And guess who was number one on the list for 5 figures? Gavin Newsom. He was on there. And it's so funny because through time, as I've contacted conservative members of Congress and Senate, they're like, well, it's not the right time yet. I don't know. Well, we'll look into it maybe. And I haven't really heard much back other than we're looking into it. The media here in California, I just said, hey, listen, it's not the what, is it? They said, no, this is totally illegal. This is like federal prison time. So I said, it's the who, isn't it? They said, yeah. If it was, and I said, if it was Donald Trump Jr., he'd be indicted already, right? And they said, probably. So I had to kind of put it on hold, but then I had my own personal issue with some kind of criminal activity in Riverside County involving my family, against my family. And there's a lot of red tape with law enforcement in California, as you know. And unless it's an emergency, it's hard to get somebody to talk to you. So, but anyway, as luck would have it, I got in touch with Sheriff Chad Bianco, who's also running for governor. And I called him on his personal phone, and I told him all about it. And he said, this is like dynamite. I said, can you use it to maybe investigate, not to help or anything in any kind of an election?
I think you kind of stumbled onto a systemic problem that California has, and you just caught just a small piece of what's probably going on throughout the state, and then of course nationwide. I mean, there's so much corruption and stuff happening, and everybody knows that all these things are coming out about the 2020 election. There's more and more proof that the Chinese was involved and the Democrats were part of the whole cover up. The FBI didn't report stuff that they were supposed to be reporting. So it's a lot of that stuff's coming to light. And that's why I'm not worried about talking about it right now, because it's everywhere. I mean, it's out there, and people are going to heads are going to start rolling eventually. And I see that smirk on your face, Shannon.
Well, you might just see something happen with this, because I am in personal contact with the sheriff who's running. And here's the funny thing. When I told him about it, he said, I'm not surprised. And I said, really? Wow. And then when I told him who this person was and who was involved, he said, I guess it was kind of off the record, but basically it was like, this has been happening for about 100 years in California. There's I'm not going to go into the conspiracy woods, but for the last 100 years, there's 4 families that have been running the state. Period. End of story. The Browns, the Newsoms, and a couple others. So that's what I'm saying. Irresistible force moving a movable object. But it may catch on. I don't know. But through the back channels, I have gotten in touch with other people who actually agree. Actually, a couple of pretty big YouTube channels, but they're like, man, I don't want to put a target on my channel, on my back, on my family. So I was like, but once it becomes a story, if it becomes a story, then who knows? It'll probably get viral.
Yeah. So what have you been up to, William? You've been quiet there.
Oh, I've been listening. I really like great information. Yeah, I mean, there's not to toot my own whistle, but just what Tony's talking about. I've broken several stories in the past couple of weeks before anybody has said anything about it, and then it's funny because my algorithm's so crappy that I get like maybe 300 or 400 views, 500 views, and then I see some of the bigger channels like FU Benny Johnson,
3
it
days
gets
later,
like a bazillion. Yeah, and I'm like, dude, I was talking about this a week ago, and I've been catching the stuff before even Gateway Pundit finds out about it, and and I've even went through the steps of verifying it to make sure, and I'm like, and I've nailed several things like before anybody's talked about it. It just kind of goes under the rug, which that's fine. I'm okay with that. There are the few viewers that do watch it and go, wow, William was talking about that, but we were just listening to him like, dude, yeah, yeah, and wait till you find out that we're not even really talking about this whole like this elephant in the room with this whole Iranian thing that that this has now become a proxy war between the United States and China. This is not going to be. This is there's a lot of we're not fighting the Iranians right now. We're fighting a bunch of Chinese people running all of these war games that they've been playing out for a long time. Iranian people, and by the way, whenever the Iron Dome was being penetrated, by these missiles that were real archaic, it's not an accident because Netanyahu told let's flub the Iron Dome so they can get a bunch of strikes in to say we'll have reasons to go in there and do stuff. You can bet it was another situation where, just like whenever October 7th took place, they were told to stand down whenever the Iranians shot their 1979 missiles and penetrated the Iron Dome. That Iron Dome could have. I have full confidence that could have handled that, but they turned the sensitivity level down so that they could get their little strikes in, so that could get Trump riled up. And what's going to end up happening is it's just going to be I don't know. I just, the whole thing about it is like, and it goes way back. I don't want to take too much time because I know Shannon wants to talk, but I just feel like this is kind of the inevitable, considering the fact that, Obama had a bunch of money and tied up in building up the Iranian nuclear forces. That was where he was sending all that cash, pallets of cash for years. So, pretty crazy. Anyways, go ahead, Shannon. Yeah, good to see you, dude, man, by the way.
How y'all doing? I call it the theater of war, because it is. It's almost like a play, a dramatic show, and we probably don't see what's really going on. We get a cover story, and that's about all we get. And the news runs with it, and then that's the truth as far as 99% of the population knows. I'm sure we're getting lied to about 90% of the time about what is going on, and they call it in the name of security or whatever. But I think it's more of a let's wag the dog, let's BS the people, because really the American people, they don't care about our opinion. They just want to keep us from rioting and doing things that hurt the economy, like boycotts and things. That's where they care. Other than that, they just want us to vote, keep our heads down, and not pay attention to the lies they're spouting. That's just my opinion, but I believe that the mainstream media and the deep state are in such bed together that over things like war, we're never going to get the truth. We're going to get clips of the truth with a whole bunch of embedded garbage because there's always a cover story. But that's just my opinion. I think it's all theatrics. When we see something on Fox or NBC and everybody's chirping the exact same talking points, maybe that's what happened. But where's the rest of the story? I know there's more to it than those 14 lines that they're all saying. We don't get that. It's a conspiracy.
Yeah. What do you say, John?
Well, pretty much, Tony doesn't. I have a background of over 30 years with the DEA, and I'm actually, Tony, I'm in Brazil right now. That's where I've been living for the last 5-6 years, and I know what goes on behind the closed doors. I've been there before. In other words, you're told to do one thing. In other words, and you have to do it. That's all there is to it. There's no questioning the chain of command. If they tell you to take, like, for instance, like Noriega in back in those days in Panama, he should never have dropped the F-bomb on the president, because within minutes there was a phone call in Panama that said, you grab that little SOB out of that chair, put him in a chopper, get him to the airport, and you get his ass back here to America. And that's exactly what happened. There was no, I mean, this is the president of Panama. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The government will do whatever the hell they want to do. Makes no difference whether there's a law against it, this, that, and the other. You can see this right now, what's been going on with the courts. I mean, at first I thought that maybe, just maybe, we might have a little bit of a common ground with the courts, with the federal districts and all that. No, they're showing us that the Constitution can be twisted around. And I mean, personally, I think that Trump has done tremendous against the courts right now, because I would have not have done that. I would have just told the judge, you don't have jurisdiction, and that's all there is to it. But there's far too much going on, and like the plot is starting to thicken on us, and it's almost getting disheartening, because I can see the same things happening that we thought for 4 years. All of us that are here on this panel. Matter of fact, I've had 3 channels taken from me, Tony, in 4 years. And I think they held me down to only 200 and some odd subscribers for the last year and a half. Now they've let me loose in the last 2 months, and I'm almost up to 2,000 or 3,000 again. I'll be back up to around 30,000 after a while. But they watch me very closely, and same here with the government here in Brazil. They watch me too. They know who I am, and it's just one of these partial problems that we've got right now. And we've got to get over it. It's basically keeping our eyes on what Trump is going to do, because it does not look good at this particular point. And there's been whisperings in the winds about something coming on not Flag Day, on Monday, which is tomorrow. I don't know what that's going to materialize into anything or not, but there's talk in the wind about that. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Wow. So
Well, might I
Tony,
make a quick point?
go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, William, I think because you're talking truth, unvarnished truth, that's why it's ratcheting down and screwing down your channel. Your channel should be way bigger. But what I noticed with the other channels that started off with like nobody, and now there's like 2 million subscribers, is to either have them as a guest on your show, or to be on their show, or to do I guess you do a lot of video on your show, but
Mhm.
like big videos mixed in with breaking videos that nobody else has. And I'll just say this, God rest his soul, but my father, he was the chief of the boat on nuclear submarines for 20 years. And when he got out of the Navy, he did top secret work. It's funny because he could never tell me what he did. And he passed away a few years ago. But I used to, just to irritate him a little, make him
Mhm.
laugh a
Mhm.
little, is I would ask him questions like, are there UFOs? And he'd say,
Mhm.
well, I can't tell you, but what I can tell you is most of them are ours.
Mhm.
And the other thing too, as I said, is the deep state real? He goes, well, let me put it to you this way. The deep state is 50-50. It's like sheriff's department, city police, or whatever, where there's like
Mhm.
50% of them win World War II, will win World War One, keep our enemies at bay, you develop, bunker buster bombs, whatever. Then the other one is bloodthirsty, sell your mother for 5 cents, murder, mayhem everywhere, destroy. We don't care. This is what we do. And
Mhm.
you don't want anything to happen to you, do you? I was like, oh, okay, so it's 50-50. And one last point, I will say, because I heard the same thing from many in 2024, that just before July the 13th, it was all over. The movement's over. They're done. Man, it's getting dangerous. It's getting scary. And then the 13th happened, and the debate happened. Then the other non-elected, never been elected candidate was put in there, and then it just went the other way. And they said it was impossible, but Trump won. And right now, and he said it, going to close the border, going to deal with immigration, going to deal with our
Right.
enemies. I'm going to strike fear to them, and I'm going to be dismantling the deep state. It's so ugly, and so it's like a octopus with roots and branches and everything everywhere, every
Right.
inch of the earth. But I think it actually is slowly being uprooted right now as we speak.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I agree.
like you say a lot, unalived. The only way to stop it is to unalive the people that are doing it. Like
Mhm.
what I'm saying is the people actually trying to dismantle and uproot. The only way to stop them is to unalive them, or to somehow. Lawfare didn't work. Bullet didn't work. Bad press didn't work. None of it's working. None of
Mhm.
it has.
Right.
Threats from across the world. Nothing seems to be stopping this unstoppable, I guess you could say,
Awakening.
revolution that's going on.
But revolution out of a form of awakening. People used to be people were, if you repeated something enough, they would go for it. You know, enough repetition, and you've lulled them back. And for some reason, that's not working at all. And even if Trump wasn't around, nobody's going to settle for any more of the establishment politicians, especially on the top end. So that's going to be a big problem for them. There's no more Bushes and Mitt Romneys. You know, this is why I think they were. You know, I think this is where, believe it or not, somebody like a guy like Tim Walz, this is how out of touch these people are when it comes to trying to figure out a way to still run the deep state. They can't, you know, it was easy to do with the establishment suits, you know, like the Bushes and like the the Clintons, and these Obama, these people that were just polished politicians. People were so used to seeing these because they're able to be president because they've worked themselves up through the ranks of political. Yeah, and so this is second nature to people, but they realize that the public is tired of even the Democrats, so they're like, this is where they thought maybe they could shove a Tim Walz, which we haven't seen the last of yet, or Kamala Harris, or the AOC. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but it's not going to work because we see through that as well. So I don't know who is going to be the next Trump-like character. This is what by now, even though it's early in the presidency, there should already be somebody stepping up on both sides. We should already start to see.
I've got a kind of an idea about that. There's several things that happen in the United States. Number one, going back to what you were saying earlier, America is just famous for going for the underdog in a lot of things. Like if somebody's being attacked and it looks like it's a little bit unjust, everybody jumps on that bandwagon. But I also think that President Trump is showing a different type of leadership, and there's going to be others that are going to inspire to that and go, that's exactly how I feel. And it's going to change that, what you're talking about, that status quo, that, what we expect out of a president. And a lot of people waking up to the fact that, hey, we the people, see that it's all interconnected. And when we realize that, wait a minute, this is our country, it's for the people, by the people, then by God, we should be able to, vote for who we want, somebody that's like us. Now, granted, Trump is a billionaire. That's the only difference, but he acts and talks and walks very, very similar to somebody who has worked hard for a living. Didn't come up, with, what do you call it, the old money, that kind of thing. So he kind of relates to the people. And then him being, constantly persecuted kind of makes it feel like, hey, he's one of us, and it's going through all the different ranks of people that can relate to that, of all different races that can relate to that. And I think the best thing that happened for Trump was not winning the 2020 election. It gave him the drive to go after it. It gave him time to look and dissect what was going on, find out where he failed. And, he's this kind of guy, he doesn't like to fail at anything. He wants to win. So I think had he had won 2020, we wouldn't have the same president we have today, and doing as much, because he was actually being taken advantage in his first term, and he wasn't aware of it, and until it was too late. So anyway, that's my rant.
Can I chime in for a second on that?
Yeah.
I think he dodged a bullet by being we're just now finding out that he was cheated literally and physically out of the election with same governor I mentioned earlier's help. I heard all kinds of rumblings around here, and I actually saw undercover videos from China at the place where they were printing those ballots. Like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Most of them got canceled and buried. But the other thing too is I started watching, because I'm a fan of like 50 Cent, etc. The kind of the non-Diddy type gangster rap, who went on to become brilliant and very wealthy and successful. He's like, well, that it doesn't work by being destructive. It doesn't work by being gangsta or whatever. But I saw this huge upsurge. Snoop Dogg, the influencers of the black community, when they said, "Damn, he almost got shot. Damn, they indicting him. I'm voting for that guy."
Right.
It swung the thing. And Hispanics who are here legally or with a green card and are doing it the right way resent the hell out of illegal immigration. So they switched as well, even in South Texas, right across the border. And
well, the illegals.
That is, he knows what he's doing. We've had people that don't know what they're doing, or they're puppets, or they're corrupt. So
yeah. Well, even the illegals that were here illegally right now that have been flying under the radar for years were pissed off because they were just working. And then when they brought in all those other people, they were like, you screwed up our gig. Now they're after all of us. And they're mad.
Now,
even the one.
Well, they're all going to go.
Yeah. Because, right now I'm just a little bit apprehensive about what's going on with Iran, even though it was probably somewhat inevitable. And if we're going to have a guy that's going to do this, first of all, I don't, Jewish people are fine. I love Jewish people. So I'm not talking junk about Jewish people. I just really don't like Israeli government. Boris is a known, or Boris or Bibi, whatever. He's a known liar. He's got, he's there's a lot to unpack here, but I'm sure that Trump understood what can happen with that route for oil. I think he knows about that. I know that they're working really hard. See, when Biden was in office, he signed in he enacted this thing that was put in place for land protection in the 50s that got the Supreme Court to rule on it. Or was it Obama that did that? One of those two. But anyways, it's where we can't drill right now. We can't make any new and also out there in the waters too. Everything has been put on hold. So that's going to be an issue. Now, and I'm going to kind of move around a little bit on some of the other things. I hope that they got that figured out, because we don't need to a bunch of things are about to happen that's going to be bad for the MAGA movement because of the distractions with this new whole proxy war with China. Does anybody remember the BP oil incident where that pipe it supposedly broke, and caused a big oil spill, and that was a big mess. And there's been documentaries that came out about that. It was because they weren't putting enough they weren't using concrete around the well, and there was a gas leak, and that caused the well rig to catch fire, but it had already, the break in that pipe looks like somebody blew that pipe up. If you looked underground, that when they shown the images of it, if that's the original image, if that's not something made up, it looks like somebody hit that son of a gun. And so I just kind of wonder what the next form of grassroots retaliation is going to occur, especially with the sleeper cells that are moving around right now in the United States. Yeah. And you don't even, it wouldn't even have to be that way. You know, for the longest time, Russian subs have been kind of hanging out on the coast of the United States on the east and the west with the ability to have nuclear, you know, capabilities for a long time. They're probably still there. Who else is out there right now? You know, because this whole deal is yes, regime change, but they need to get rid of Bibi Netanyahu. That's who they need to get rid of. If you're on a regime change, this is what we need. Like when Trump says, I'm interested in a regime change, they need to uproot Bibi Netanyahu and then do something different there. That'd be the most epic and most pimp thing I'd ever seen, is Bibi Netanyahu, who sits on his big old high horse looking like he's thinking he's some kind of big king now. They need to go in there and take that guy out politically, not the FBI watching.
Yeah.
You know, they just need to handcuff the guy and put him into a jail
Put some
cell.
new blood in there.
And put him in. Yeah, get move that leadership out of the way peacefully, and put somebody else in, and then maybe do a little bit of regime change so that the women don't have Sharia law anymore over there in Iraq. And you might actually find peace, because no matter what you do, they want this ongoing conflict. But the thing is this is going to be weird. I don't know how we're going to fare out through this and still have a MAGA movement on top of that.
You got
I'm wrong
Nancy,
about
man.
yeah, well, Nancy, I look, Netanyahu's not a good guy. I mean, he was in Nancy, please, in a respectful manner, do you understand that he's been in serious trouble for all the corruption involved? He stood for the stand down of the military for 7.5 hours while people floated across the border with backpack blowers and did all that terrible, there was military ready to go. And he was, if you knew what I knew, you would hold him in a similar regard as Bibi and Duar, believe me. Yeah. Well, like I said, but he allowed that to happen on October 7th. And then on top of that, he actually advocated and had 90%, he made sure that 90% of his population was inoculated with that stuff that Fauci came out with, and laughed about it. There's a lot. He has the same leftist idiots filing charges against him like DJT. Well, that could be the case. I just know it seemed like there was a big military stand down the whole time. And he'd been caught in a lot of lies before when it came to what was it? That conflict back 20 years ago. I don't know. I just maybe I need to go back to school. So please, respectfully understand that I'm still learning. The story about requiring the job is false. It is disinfo. Yeah. Well, or requiring the jab is false. Well, Netanyahu did say that on camera. Said he was he had the most populated injections, and was like, I consider our population like a good testing ground, considering how many we've gotten to do this. And I'm like, oh, I didn't, he might not have required it, but they did something. But I don't know. Well, I've got a lot to learn, so please forgive me if I'm not understanding everything.
Well, going back to the Buster bomb or bunker. Bunker Buster. Yeah. You mentioned that earlier, William. Did you catch the part where this is the first time this bomb type has ever been used? They've actually developed it because they as they've been watching Iran build the nuclear facility, they also knew that they came up with a new high strength concrete that has metal shards and other stuff in it that's supposed to be unpenetratable. And so that makes me wonder, well, then they've been working on this and developing it all this time. So, when you develop something, you're like, well, I want to use it. I don't know. I'm just, starting a little trouble. Yeah.
Well, no, you're good. But a lot of our Iranian nuclear capabilities were started and built up by people like Obama, and I think Bush Jr. was involved with all this money being sent over to the it was state funded terrorism, because you remember ISIS.
they said that they were basically paying them not to be terrorists, is what the underlining, what they were kind of saying. Well, we give them all this help. They're not going to want to attack the hand that feeds them, which is, that was the thought behind that, which is really ludicrous, really.
It's like giving a crackhead crack not to smoke crack.
Right, exactly.
Well, the sanctions don't work. The sanctions don't work on them, or they have in the past, as far as like the oil sanctions, to cut them off from being able to pump oil to the rest of the world so they can get rich, like Biden let them do for 4 years. See, we need to immediately shut off oil sanctions to them. That should have been done on day one. But besides that, they need to be sanctioned in a dozen other ways. So their economy is really kind of crippled unless they come to the table. Well, they wasn't listening. They had 60 days to come try to negotiate some kind of deal. They didn't want to play ball. I have no mercy for the Iranian leadership. Now, the Iranian people I have nothing against, but the Iranian leadership is a bunch of liars, a bunch of America-hating fools. And I hope it doesn't cause us terroristic activity over here, but that's about all they got left, considering us and Israel own the skies over there of Iran right now, and they are taking a licking. And I'm glad to see it, not so much for the loss of life, but for the fact that maybe this problem of worrying about Iran, who would kill us in Israel. They've said it 100 times. They don't have no problem with being part of a terrorist organization or funding a terrorist organization to disrupt our lives. So I think they need to be handled up on in this way. I hate the fact that America needs to go to war over here. I hate to think America should ever have to get in a war. But I think sometimes there is a necessity. And like right now, when we have opportunity to finish them off, at least maybe 10 years progress. They spent 10 plus years building this facility in order to enrich this uranium, in order to build these bombs, in order to be able to be, I guess, a bigger threat, if not just intentional planning to destroy us all. Something had to be done. And I believe that's the real story. I believe there's a lot of propaganda involved with when it had to be done, if they were going to build it next week and we had to get it done by this year. I don't know. I think all that is, who knows when the real timeline is, when they were going to get the capabilities. But if they hate us so much they want to destroy us and they preach that, they shouldn't have the capabilities. We should take it away from them. And that's just my opinion.
I think if we just drop a big old, real quick. We just need to go over there and instead of bombing them with all these bunker busters, it's really hot over there. Really, really hot. I say poison ivy water and just like hey, you put out a forest fire with helicopters. You just drive by when they're all out there and just drop poison ivy water all over them and watch them scratch for 2 or 3 weeks. That'll calm them down for a while.
Jesus.
Good. Now, one thing too that I want to bring up is shortly before we became live, I was watching one of the channels that from Israel that was live, and what's going on right now, believe it or not, in the Gaza, there are literally thousands of Gazans, Palestinians, in the streets marching against Hamas. They're asking Hamas to leave. I don't know what's going to come of that. I'm going to have to find out a little bit later on.
I was wondering if that might happen. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the streets by the thousands. They're telling Hamas, get the hell out of our Gaza. They want them out of Gaza.
Surrounding countries all can benefit from this because they all know that this regime would rather die, and they take the death as being a glorious thing, where everybody else kind of wants to live. So they're really not afraid. Now the difference is that's their government, but the people, I don't feel, have the same sentiments as their government. Of course, they're not going to say or not stand out and say that because they might be in harm's way. But you get enough people to rise up, which it might be part of the ploy. You devastate them in enough places. I mean, they hit the oil and fuel refineries and stuff already. So and some of the power grids down over there, from what Israel's been doing. So they're going to be in dire straits, and it'd be perfect time for people to get up and just say, "Hey, we want a new government." I mean, I don't
What-
know.
Yeah,
What are they going to do when their USAID check doesn't show up this month?
yeah, that's
What do you
It's,
say, Tony?
it's coming
Well,
to
I
that.
will tell you, I follow a really amazing channel. Can I mention the channel on here?
well, certainly.
Sure.
2C TV. He's Iranian, but he's British. Okay, his father's in Tehran. He's getting video live streams from inside Iran. The guy's
Oh, really?
I'm dual citizen with the United Kingdom. Okay, he said I had to stop saying I was Iranian a long time ago because he's very conservative, but he also is he's like I'm British and he has an American and British flag behind him, total Trump supporter, and he's showing videos and translating from Farsi inside of Iran, death to the dictator, death to Khomeini. They're done there in the streets of Tehran. And military
Yeah.
leaders are sending messages out as well that
Kinda
they're
what-
willing to work with whoever's next. And might I just throw a few little things, food for thought, basically. What if in the 1970s, when you guys might remember, inflation was terrible, way worse than it is now.
It'll be the
Gas
Carter
prices
era.
were high. We had Governor Moonbeam here in California who
Hmm.
refused to build new infrastructure, even though when I was a kid, they said there's going to be millions more people here. We need to build more water and freeway and electrical, whatever infrastructure. They refused to. To this day, they're still fighting it. Okay. But we also had Jimmy Carter, who gave the Panama Canal, and I don't know how he did it, but he handed Iran to the Islamic Revolution there. What if he was just saying, sure, yeah, let's work against the United States and open up the biggest enemy in the entire world in that area that festered all the proxies of Iran and has killed many, many of their own people and even Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan, which I think it would have been a good idea to just go there and then just turn it into like the Korean border or Germany, where we're just there keeping the eyes on everything and not firing bullets and not left there. Just kept like 2,000 people. Don't run the place. Just keep an eye and say, if anything happens, you're done. But what if at some point somebody said, well, we need something that's really good for the deep state. So why don't we install these Afghanis? They're not Persian, they're not Iranian. The mullahs are actually Afghan, like royalty that took over the whole country, like Mao Zedong and Pol Pot. They subverted the whole entire place, turned it into a third world shithole, and have oppressed their people the entire time. What if the same thing happened in Gaza? And also, I will kind of slightly differ with you, Mr. Archibald, and I've seen it in the comments too, is I believe from knowing the small handful of conservative, pretty powerful Jews in California, not the regular, Democrat, left leaning, I'm just Jewish in name only, that Netanyahu has been fighting the internal, there's a deep state within the Jewish community as well. I don't want to name names, but there are some pretty famous Jewish people who actually are working against their own people and governments within governments. I believe that, just my opinion, that Netanyahu actually is kind of like a Trump-esque figure in Israel. He's
I'm
been
glad I'm
battled
learning.
since day one by the
Yeah.
left. And I think he's just trying to do a good job for the people. I'm not 100% sold on that. And I've heard from different people that actually are dual Israeli United States citizens that live right here in town. Like, well, I know, but so that they're really you're seeing the manifestation. Remember in The Exorcist when they said the power of Christ compels you, and it really started bringing that possession out. I think that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the worst of it because it's being exercised. And it's really coming from the people and social media and people like Trump or Millet or other figures who have risen up in Europe that said, we can't do this migration welfare state thing anymore. We can't do it. It's not working. And the people have risen up, and social media has risen up, and there are people that are in government that are not politicians that are fighting this monster, this embedded monster that's everywhere in the entire world. Just some food for thought there, because it might not be what it
I'm
appears
glad
to
that you're
be.
telling me that. I'm glad you're telling me that because that backs up what Nancy Dunks is saying. I'm not saying she doesn't know what she's talking about, but I'm kind of going off information that I listen to a lot of the more of the I do listen to some InfoWars, and so I've been kind of go off of that, and to hear that is good. I would like to have an open mind about this, and maybe hopefully see an end to these means in a way that's positive. And so maybe there's maybe this will work out. I don't know, but I appreciate that information, and I'm going to look into that more too, because I would hope so, because I've seen him.
I've often wondered, William, if because whenever we get together, we're always we're preaching to the choir, but wonder what would happen if somebody actually did a show where you brought on a left and a right, and do you think it would just be a fight the whole time, or do you think
I don't think it would. I don't actually think it would, as long as what causes the fight. What causes the fights a lot of the times is the fact that, I guess, conviction in your beliefs, which is understandable for human nature, right? But but you've got to have a side of you that needs to learn, and something, somebody saying something outlandish and completely does bonkers, and but you can let them speak and work around that. But I think it's possible. I think we need that more than anything right now at this point too.
Well, because we, and like I've said this many times, I watch a lot of conservative channels and other things, but I also watch a lot of the other side, people complaining about Trump, and all, because I want to know, what are they saying? What are they upset about? What do they think? And of course, some of the bigger channels out there, they're like super radical, and then after you've watched them for a bit, you can't handle it anymore, because their thought process just doesn't work. You know what I mean? It's not a common sense kind of thought process.
Like MSNBC.
What? Go ahead, John.
I said like MSNBC. That is, I mean, all that you have to do is watch that for 60 seconds. You got I just became stupider since I watched it for 60 seconds. It's just the point you can't do it anymore. Literally, it's really. They'll sit there with conviction and tell you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, to quote Lao Tzu, was it Sun Tzu or Lao Tzu in The Art of War? Know thy enemy. I actually enjoy watching them projectile vomit what they're doing, and then I listen to the different sides, and then I use critical thinking to distill. Let me just give you a quick example. When I used to live in the South, you live in the South, don't you, Mr. Archibald? I used to live in the South. I came straight from California to the South, and I was like, oh my God.
Well, North Carolina is
south of Maine.
I'll put it to you like this: it's a melting pot of a little bit of both. I mean, you've got a lot of, I mean, so it is there's a lot of South stuff going on there.
Well, where I lived in the four corners of Northwest Arkansas, and then there was Missouri, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And
the hog yard.
It was kind of like an Austin of the South, where it was very left, but 5 miles away out of town, it was like the real people. But here's my point: when I lived there, when I lived there, and this will be right to your point of discerning the information. Okay,
Mhm.
I had a friend, pretty high ranking in the sheriff's department there, and he used to invite me to go on ride-alongs, and I would go, and this was like 20 years ago, and there was a lot of illegal immigration because there were a lot of food companies in that area, etc., and whole neighborhoods. Like there was a town that he oversaw. It was called Springdale. He called it El Springdale.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
here's the point. He said, "Hey, I have a colleague that would like to take you on a ride along." I said, "Really?" He was the accident reconstructionist.
Mhm.
And he said, "Oh, I got an interesting case today." He had a clipboard and stuff. This was back early 2000s. And he said, "Well, we got a little bit of a sticky wicket here. Here's why. The guy who caused the accident is related to the sheriff,
Mm.
and
Uh-oh.
he's a
Uh-oh.
punk, and he's a kid who thinks he can
Mhm.
get away with anything. And it was a Walmart truck that caused a big jackknife incident right in the middle of town." And he
Mhm.
said, "Well, they put me on it because I'm gonna have to give them the bad news, and I don't give a crap." So what he did was he walked right up to the scene. He had his clipboard. He had statements from all the people, and he was taking pictures of the glass and the tire marks, engine, everything. Did breathalyze and blood tests of everybody, and he had all these statements, and he this different colored circles on all of them, and he goes, "What do you see?" And I said, "Well, the truck driver said it was the kid's fault. The kid said it was the truck's fault. These people over here said they heard a noise and then they looked." So he said, "Well, they don't know what happened because light travels faster than sound. They looked after it was already over, so I don't, they don't know what happened." But I looked at all the circles, and then he moved it over to a different piece of paper, and he said, "Now what do you see? Every thing that was on that separate piece of paper was the only thing that each one of them said that was exactly the same." He said, "That's the
Mhm.
truth right there. And where that glass is,
No.
where the gas that sprayed out of the truck was over there, blah, blah, blah." Basically, he said, "Well, here's my report right here with the photos and the statements, etc. This is what happened. It was the kid's fault, and he made it up, and there was like 9 other people that said the same thing, even though they had their own point of view." And that's basically how I take the media. It's like a big giant accident. Somebody has this narrative, they're trying to lie. Somebody has a narrative like, "Hey, it wasn't my fault. I didn't do it. I'm just trying to
Right.
take this load to Walmart or whatever." And that's basically how I look at the news, as an accident reconstruction, and whatever is consistent and the truth. Like I kept hearing 2020 was rigged. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Now all of a sudden, physical evidence of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, the only problem with that, that I see and what I've discovered as I look, because I do the same thing. I look at all the different news and so forth and kind of, because even Gateway Pundit will say something and you'll go, whoa, and you go look at it and you go,
Right.
oh, well, it's not that bad. It wasn't that, not like they made out. So they're guilty of the same thing,
Absolutely.
and vice versa. But the one thing that mainstream media has that all the smaller Gateway Pundits and the Trend and all the other USA, conservative news outlets don't have is they very seldom quote the AP, where mainstream is always saying, according to the AP. And you can always tell because every single channel has the same talking points, the same buzzwords. And so, it's like when you go and type something into AI, it goes and searches the internet. Well, it finds a whole bunch of articles about something, so AI assumes this is correct. Now,
Right.
if all these points of view are all coming from the same place, then it skews even the AI, to the point where you're not really getting what's really happening. You just got a ton of one viewpoint or agenda, which that's what the AP does. The AP sends out all their news out, and everybody's just saying the same thing. A few channels change it up a little bit, but it's damn near word for word on a lot of stuff.
If
So I
if
don't know.
not
Mhm.
if 90% of the channels are propaganda, 90% of the information is propaganda, AI is doomed. Because
that's exactly my point. And I've tested it. I've asked AI, and I even got into a conversation with it and said, look, if you have 10 articles, but they all refer back to one central news hub, then just because there's 10 doesn't mean that they're correct, because the one might be right and the other one is wrong, but it sent out 10, different channels on the internet. So AI looks at it as, oh, look at all these opinions, So anyway, that's my take on.
Well, guys, I got to get out of here. I got to go.
Yeah, it's time. We're at the top of the hour.
But nice to meet you,
Shannon.
Good to see everybody again.
Hey,
y'all welcome to come check out my live on Sundays as well. I feed the homeless every Sunday afternoon about midday. And
you're doing that in Waco, right?
I do that here in Waco, Texas. Every weekend, I fed like 42 people, 43 people today in about an hour and 2 minutes. Fed them about 300 pounds of food today. It was pretty awesome. Been doing it for 20 something weeks now, every Sunday.
Yeah. I can contest. I went down and visited him. You should have seen his front room. I mean, he had food stacked.
And I bought a deep freeze. I'm buying coolers. I'm investing in doing this because God's put it on my heart to do. And the food shows up now. I got 3 different locations now that I get food from in order to make this happen every weekend. And so it's a good thing. Right. It's obviously meant to be. And for some reason, YouTube doesn't mind letting me get out there. I think I got almost 10,000 views on my video today on my live.
Oh, good. Wow.
I guess because there was no politics involved, probably.
No politics. That's right.
But y'all guys have a great day.
We're going to be getting out of here too, Shannon. So, is there anything?
Nice to see everybody.
All right.
I just want to say that, and everybody have a blessed weekend.
All right.
Yeah.
You too.
You too, Shannon. Good to see you, dude.
Over now, guys.
Later, Shannon.
Nice to meet you.
Anything else, Tony, you want to promote or,
Well, you know what? Some of the stuff I couldn't really comfortably speak about openly on here, but Mr. Dave and Mr. William there for sure. It would be good if you could give me some kind of contact in the background so I could tell you kind of some other stuff that really is I'm actually working on right now.
We go off air. We'll go off air and we'll do that.
Yeah. Let's close out.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll do it off the air. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Nancy Dunks, you're a rock star. We appreciate
you. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for watching me work.
Yeah, Nancy.
Yes.
Yep, and I'm wading through the information warfare, and I'm learning as I go. So thank you for your understanding.
Yeah. And Lisette and Carrie and everybody. I saw your wife was in there too, Stephanie. So anyway, we're got to get out of here. We'll talk to you not next week, but the week after. 4th of July, I'm taking off. All right. Bye-bye.